Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us down a fascinating rabbit hole this time, really.
Oh yeah, what's the topic?
The very origins of life, not just here on Earth, but also that tantalizing possibility of it existing somewhere else.
Wow, okay, that's a big one. Fundamental stuff.
Totally. It kicked off for us with a really thought-provoking discussion we saw between Stephen Meyer and James Tour. That got our gears turning.
Ah, Meyer and Tour. Yeah, they have some strong views on this.
Exactly. So we pulled together some sources, their chat, of course, but also Wikipedia's history of origin of life research, some incredible insights from NASA's Webb telescope.
Oh, the Webb data is exciting.
Some NSF research on early Earth conditions, and actually some very recent news about potential signs of life spotted by Webb.
Okay, fantastic. So we're tackling abiogenesis, how life pops up from non-living stuff.
Right. And, also the search for extraterrestrial life. It's a question that sits right at the heart of, well, everything, doesn't it? Our place in the universe.
It really does. People have wondered for centuries how life could arise from non-living matter. That's abiogenesis. And then, are we alone? Or is life maybe common out there?
And it's important, like you said, we're talking abiogenesis, not evolution after life got started. That was Darwin's focus, how life changed and diversified.
Right. Darwin speculated a bit, didn't he? The warm little pond idea. But this is about the initial spark. How did that first life ignite?
Which brings us to the famous primordial soup idea. Upperin and Haldane, right? Early 20th century.
That's the one. Their core idea was that early Earth's atmosphere was very different. Reducing, they called it.
Meaning lots of gases like methane, ammonia, not much oxygen.
Exactly. And they figured energy sources, maybe lightning, maybe UV light from the sun could zap those gases.
And create simple organic molecules, the building blocks.
Right, monomers, things like amino acids. These would then theoretically collect in the oceans, the soup, and then somehow they'd link up into longer chains, polymers like proteins or nucleic acids. And eventually, somehow, you get the first cells. That was the picture.
So that image, the bubbling ocean making life's ingredients, that really stuck. And a lot of that perception comes from the Miller-Urey experiment, doesn't it? 1952.
Absolutely. Miller and Urey tried to replicate those proposed early Earth conditions in a lab. They had flasks simulating the atmosphere and ocean, zapped it with electric sparks.
Mimicking lightning.
Right. And lo and behold, they did produce amino acids.
Which must have seemed like a massive breakthrough at the time. Like, okay, we're on the right track.
It generated huge excitement, definitely. It was the first real experimental hint that, yes, organic building blocks could potentially form under those kinds of conditions. They found, 10–15% of the carbon ended up in organic compounds.
And I read that a reanalysis later, like 2011, found even more amino acids in their old samples, like 23 types.
That's right, they did.
Yeah.
And this is where our sources, especially James Tour, really pumped the brakes. Hard.
Yeah, he doesn't mince words, does he? He basically calls the whole primordial soup idea nonsense. What are his main problems with it?
Well, Tour points out several really critical issues. First, Miller-Urey didn't just make the amino acids life uses. It made a whole bunch of other ones not found in biology.
Okay, so it wasn't specific.
Not specific enough. And second, a huge one, chirality, or handedness. The amino acids they made were a 50-50 mix of left-handed and right-handed forms, a racemic mixture.
But life almost exclusively uses the left-handed versions, right?
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Yeah.
For amino acids anyway, how you get that selection process happening naturally without biological machinery already present, that's a massive unsolved problem.
It's like trying to build something needing only right-handed screws when your box is full of half left-handed ones. It just jams things up.
Precisely. And Tour emphasizes, even if you magically got only the right-handed amino acids, the next step, linking them together to form proteins, polymerization, that's another enormous hurdle. How does that happen spontaneously in water, which tends to break chains apart, not form them?
He has that analogy about his nanocar research, doesn't he?
Yes, it's quite powerful. He says designing and building these incredibly complex molecular machines, these nanocars, is basically child's play.
Child's play.
Compared to the complexity of the actual molecular machinery inside even the simplest living cell. The proteins, the enzymes, DNA, RNA, how they all integrate and work together. He's saying we're nowhere near understanding how that could self-assemble.
So the picture emerging is, well, the more we learn about the sheer complexity of life at the molecular level,
the harder the origin of life problem seems to get, not easier.
Yeah. Stephen Meyer makes a similar point in that discussion. He talks about how early scientists, like Huxley, thought a cell was just simple protoplasm.
A simple, homogeneous globule, yeah. How wrong they were.
Totally. Meyer stresses that even basic cells have these incredibly sophisticated systems: information storage, processing, transmission, like tiny factories building proteins.
Which brings us squarely to DNA. Watson and Crick, 1953. The double helix. That discovery was pivotal.
And the information aspect is key here. You get these amazing comparisons, Bill Gates calling DNA a computer program.
Leroy Hood calling it digital code.
Even Richard Dawkins talking about the machine code of the genes being uncannily computer-like.
Exactly. So the problem isn't just getting the molecules, it's getting the sequence, the specific arrangement that carries instructions. It's about information.
And Meyer makes this distinction, doesn't he, between Shannon information and specified information?
Yes, that's a crucial point for him. Shannon information is about reducing uncertainty, like knowing the outcome of a coin flip. It measures complexity or improbability.
Okay.
But specified information is different. It's not just improbable. It's improbable and matches an independent pattern or performs a specific function, like letters arranged into a meaningful sentence, not just a random jumble.
He uses a poetry analogy, right? Random letters versus a poem.
Precisely. Both might be equally unlikely combinations, but the poem has specification. It conforms to rules of language and meaning. And DNA, he argues, is packed with that kind of specified functional information.
So the challenge shifts from just making molecules to explaining the origin of this complex functional blueprint.
Exactly. And this is where Meyer introduces the argument for intelligent design.
Okay, let's tread carefully here.
Right. His argument essentially is that in our uniform and repeated experience, complex specified information like software code or language or blueprints always comes from an intelligent mind.
So he infers that these specified information in DNA also points to an intelligent source.
That's the core of the inference, yes. Now, it's really important we state clearly, this viewpoint, intelligent design, is highly controversial.
Yeah, the mainstream scientific community does not accept it as science.
Correct. Major organizations like the AAAS, the American Chemical Society, they strongly endorse biological evolution and are critical of intelligent design. They state it lacks scientific evidence, it's not testable in the same way.
Right. We're reporting on the arguments presented in our sources here.
Absolutely. And Tour, interestingly, while he agrees completely about the massive scientific challenges and the lack of progress in origin of life research.
And he acknowledges the force of Meyer's points about information.
Yes, but he's more cautious about jumping straight to an intelligent design conclusion. He keeps emphasizing the sheer number of unsolved chemical problems that need answers first.
Like what?
Like even if you have DNA or RNA, they don't work in isolation. They need a whole suite of supporting enzymes and cellular machinery to replicate, transcribe, translate. Where did that come from?
And he talked about the fidelity problem too, right? Keeping the information accurate during copying.
Yes. His own lab work apparently shows how incredibly hard it is to get accurate replication of even simple molecules without the sophisticated air-checking machinery that life already possesses. In a prebiotic soup, forget it, the errors would accumulate almost instantly.
It really highlights the gap between simple chemistry and functioning biology.
It does. Tour also brings up the historical context, noting that many early scientists, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, Boyle, saw design in nature as part of their science. The shift later towards purely materialistic explanations has, in his view, made explaining origins much harder.
And this resistance to design ideas in the scientific community, Tour sees it as almost a protective reaction.
He seems to suggest that, yeah, that the community defends the current paradigm quite strongly.
But beyond the chemistry, beyond the information, Tour raises something even more fundamental.
He does, the actual definition of life itself.
His examples are striking. A petunia seed looks dead, add water, it sprouts. What changed? Or a cell that just died. All the molecules are still there, for a moment at least, but it's not alive anymore.
Exactly. What is that spark? What constitutes aliveness at the most basic level? He argues, quite compellingly, that we fundamentally don't know. We're still profoundly in the dark about what life is.
That is humbling, isn't it? After all this science, that basic question
Still looms large.
Okay, so the origin of life on Earth. Clearly a massive, maybe deepening mystery. Let's shift gears now and look outwards. The search for life beyond Earth.
Right. One idea that sometimes comes up, though it doesn't solve the origin problem itself, is panspermia.
Ah, yes. The idea that life didn't start here but arrived from somewhere else.
Essentially, yes. It proposes life exists throughout the universe and gets distributed via meteoroids, comets, space dust. So, life might have originated once, somewhere, and then spread.
Is there much evidence for that?
It's mostly hypothetical, but there are suggestive hints. We know some microbes, extremophiles, can survive the harsh conditions of space, at least for a while. We found complex organic molecules, even amino acids, in meteorites.
So the building blocks could travel between planets.
Possibly. Some even speculate that early Mars might have been a more favorable environment for, say, RNA formation than early Earth was. But again, it just pushes the origin question elsewhere.
Okay. But the real excitement right now seems to be coming from the James Webb Space Telescope, looking at exoplanets.
Oh, absolutely. Webb is a game changer for studying exoplanet atmospheres. Its power in the infrared spectrum lets scientists analyze the light filtering through an atmosphere.
And figure out what gases are present.
Exactly. They look for biosignatures gases or combinations of gases that might indicate biological processes.
Like oxygen plus methane, maybe?
That's one classic example, yeah. But it's incredibly challenging work. These signals are faint, you need long observation times, and you have to rule out non-biological explanations.
So finding one potential biosignature isn't proof?
Definitely not proof. It would be a tantalizing hint, requiring lots of follow-up, multiple lines of evidence, ruling out false positives. It's a long game.
Which brings us to the recent headlines about K2-18b. What's the story there?
K2-18b is an exoplanet, quite a bit larger than Earth, orbiting a cool dwarf star in its habitable zone.
The Goldilocks zone? Not too hot, not too cold for liquid water.
Potentially, yes. And Webb observations have suggested the possible presence of a molecule called dimethyl sulfide, DMS, and maybe dimethyl disulfide, DMDS, in its atmosphere.
And why is DMS significant?
Because here on Earth, the vast majority of DMS in our atmosphere is produced by life, specifically phytoplankton in the oceans.
Okay, so finding it elsewhere, that's pretty suggestive. Some news reports called it the strongest evidence yet.
It certainly generated a lot of excitement, and it is a very interesting finding. But crucially, the scientists involved are being quite cautious.
As they should be, I guess.
Absolutely. The initial hints came in 2023. Then a more recent study, using a different Webb instrument, MIRI, provided potentially corroborating evidence for DMS or DMDS.
So multiple instruments seeing something similar?
Potentially. And the researchers, led by Niku Matusudhan, are exploring the idea that K2-18b could be what they call the Hyson world.
Hyson, what's that?
It's a hypothetical type of planet larger than Earth, with a hydrogen-rich atmosphere, but crucially, with a global ocean of liquid water underneath that atmosphere.
Hydrogen plus ocean, Hyson, got it.
Right, and they suggest that on such a world, maybe DMS production by life could be more significant, leading to the higher concentrations they might be seeing compared to Earth.
But there's skepticism too.
Oh yes. Other scientists have raised questions. Some question the statistical strength of the detection signal itself. Is it really robust enough?
Like, could it just be noise in the data?
That's one concern. Others point out that even if DMS is there, we can't be certain it's from life. There might be non-biological ways to produce it.
Such as?
Well, maybe geological activity, like unusual volcanoes or hydrothermal vents. Some suggest comet impacts could deliver sulfur compounds, maybe even atmospheric chemistry driven by lightning. We just don't know enough about the planet yet.
And the whole Hyson world idea itself is still just a hypothesis, right?
Exactly. Whether K2-18b actually is a water world with a hydrogen atmosphere is still being investigated and debated. So lots of unknowns.
So it's exciting, but definitely not we found aliens yet.
Not by a long shot. But it shows the potential of Webb to probe these atmospheres. Even if this particular signal turns out to be ambiguous, the technique is powerful. We can study the chemistry of distant worlds.
And it's interesting how studying early Earth helps inform this search, that NSF research you mentioned.
Right. Looking at the chemistry of fluids in Earth's early crust, they focused on the availability of metals like copper and manganese.
Why those metals?
Because they're crucial components of many enzymes, essential for metabolism. Understanding which metals were actually available in the environments where life might have first emerged, that helps us identify potentially habitable conditions elsewhere.
And they found something surprising about manganese.
Yeah, they suggested manganese might have been more available in those early fluids than copper, which is often the focus. It highlights how the geology of a young planet interacts with emerging biology, something we need to consider when looking at exoplanets too.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, it feels like we're left with this profound sense of mystery on both fronts.
I think that's fair. The origin of life on Earth seems, if anything, more challenging the more we learn about cellular complexity and information.
The simple cell is anything but simple.
Exactly. And while the Webb telescope is opening incredible new windows onto exoplanet atmospheres, giving us these tantalizing hints like K2-18b,
We have to be patient and rigorous. Cautious interpretation is key.
absolutely, it's early days in that search. So much more data and analysis are needed.
It really does echo that ancient sense of wonder, doesn't it? Like those lines in Proverbs about the things too wonderful to understand. The way of an eagle in the sky, a snake on a rock. Maybe the origin of life itself fits in there.
It certainly feels that profound. Whether life is unique to Earth, a fluke event, or if the universe is literally teeming with it. Either answer is just staggering.
It really makes you want to keep following the science, astrobiology, origin of life studies, the ongoing discoveries from Webb. There's so much still to learn.
Absolutely. The quest continues.
And, thinking about the sheer wonder of life, its complexity, its origins, it connects in a way to understanding life as we experience it. Our sister channel, Health Hacks on MD Talk Health and Fitness, delves into the practical side of life and health. This deep dive into origins, well, it's another facet of understanding this amazing phenomenon of life itself. Definitely check out Health Hacks too.